Hey everyone, so let's talk about modern architecture. You know the look, right? The glass towers, the concrete blocks, the super clean lines that basically make up our cities. But the story of how we got here, well, it's way more bizarre, way more radical, and honestly, pretty shocking than you'd probably guess. And it all kicks off with a plan to, get this, completely destroy one of the world's most beautiful cities. I mean, can you even picture it? Bulldozing the historic heart of Paris, the Marais, the area around the Louvre, all those incredible winding streets, and replacing them with this, a rigid grid of identical towers and these massive multi-lane highways. And the craziest part? This wasn't some sci-fi writer's nightmare. Nope, this was a very real proposal from one of the most famous architects of the 20th century.
So the man with this grand and kind of terrifying vision was the Swiss-French architect Le Corbusier, and his plan had a name, the Plan Voisin. This was his idea for what he called the Radiant City. And make no mistake, it was nothing less than a total top-to-bottom reinvention of what a city could even be.
The sheer scale of this thing is just mind-boggling. Le Corbusier didn't see Paris as, a living, breathing city full of history. He saw it as a broken-down machine that desperately needed to be fixed. And his solution? Just tear down the past and replace it with this super rational, hyper-efficient system. You'd have separate zones for everything, one for living, one for working, one for industry, all neatly connected by highways. And this wasn't just a one-off for Paris. Oh no, he saw this as a universal blueprint you could just stamp onto cities all over the world. So you have to ask, where on earth does an idea this extreme even come from? Okay, so to even begin to understand the impulse to just bulldoze Paris, you have to realize that modernism wasn't just about making buildings look cool and different. It was a full-blown utopian social movement. It was born from a powerful reaction against the very real, very grim problems of the time. Think about it. The 19th century industrial city was, for many people, a total nightmare. It was overcrowded, filthy, dark, just deeply unhealthy. So the modernists saw themselves as saviors, really. They truly believed that through rational design, they could wipe out disease with more sunlight and better ventilation. They thought they could solve society's biggest problems with efficient housing. A building wasn't just a place to live. It was a blueprint for a brand new, healthier, better future for everyone.
And right on cue, the technology was starting to catch up to this new philosophy. The Industrial Revolution gave them the tools they needed: mass-produced iron, then steel, and these huge panes of glass. Suddenly, it was physically possible to build taller, lighter, more open buildings than anyone had ever dreamed of before. You had structures like the Crystal Palace or Chicago's very first skyscrapers, showing everyone what was possible. So the tools were there, ready to go. But they were about to be picked up and used by an ideology that had, well, let's just say it had an almost religious intensity.
Yeah, because this wasn't just about finding practical solutions anymore. The movement took on this fervent, almost cult-like energy. It splintered into all these competing groups, and every single one of them was trying to create the one true art for the modern age. In his fantastic book, From Bauhaus to Our House, Tom Wolfe calls these groups compounds, and it's the perfect description. You had artists literally declaring independence from the old stuffy art academies. They'd write these dramatic manifestos proclaiming that they, and only they, truly understood the spirit of the new century. It was like a giant competition to see who could be the purest, the most radical.
And some of these compounds were, wow, truly extreme. Take the Italian futurists. These guys worshipped speed, machines, and they even glorified violence. Their manifesto literally called for burning down museums and libraries, for cutting off all ties with the past. So it's probably no surprise to hear that their movement ended up having pretty close ties to fascism. Then you have this Viennese architect, Adolf Loos, who came out and declared that ornament, decoration, wasn't just old-fashioned. He said it was immoral, a sign of degeneracy. And his argument for this was, frankly, pretty racist. He basically argued that modern man had evolved past the need for decoration, which he connected to what he called primitive cultures. Yikes. So here's the key takeaway, the thing that ties all of this together, this shared search for purity. It didn't matter if it was a hatred for museums or a hatred for decorative carvings. The underlying belief was exactly the same. They thought if you could just strip away all the messy layers of history, all the cultural baggage, you'd be left with something pure, something true, rational, and universal. And that is why the aesthetic is so minimalist. It's a direct result of this philosophical quest.
So the big question is, how did all these radical, competing, kinda out there European ideas get packaged up into one single, repeatable style that would eventually take over the entire planet? Well, the answer, for the most part, is the Bauhaus. This was a school in Germany, founded by Walter Gropius, and it was probably the single most influential institution of the whole movement. It's the place that took all those wild manifestos and turned them into a curriculum, something you could actually teach and reproduce. The goal was to create prototypes for a whole new world. And, it had its own weird history, too. Early on, there was this mystic teacher, part of a cult, called Ms. Doznan, who had the entire school canteen eating garlic paste for spiritual purity. So yeah, it wasn't all just straight lines and right angles. And this brings us right back to the movement's biggest star, Le Corbusier. His famous quote really says it all. He believed a home should be designed with the same cold, rational efficiency as a car or an airplane. All that mushy sentimentality, gone. And he didn't just talk the talk. He translated this belief into a crystal-clear formula. These 5 points basically became the essential toolkit, like a repeatable grammar for this new architectural language. You lift the building up on columns, you free the walls from having to hold everything up, you use long ribbon windows, and boom, you've created a system that basically anyone could learn and use to create these light, open, machine-like spaces. The final piece of the puzzle was the branding. In 1932, New York's Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, put on this huge landmark exhibition, and they gave the movement a new name, the International Style. I mean, the name itself just perfectly nails the goal, right? An architecture that you could build anywhere in the world, completely detached from local culture, from local history. Modernism was no longer just some European cult. It was now a global brand, ready for export. And boy, did it succeed. The movement totally won. Its architects spread across the globe, especially after World War II, building everything: entire cities, corporate headquarters, massive public housing projects. But did that utopian dream ever actually come true? This quote, this really marks the symbolic end of that dream. Prude-Igoe was this enormous public housing project in St. Louis, built entirely on these pure modernist principles. But it very quickly fell into crime, disrepair, and decay. And its demolition, which was spectacular and broadcast on live television, was seen by so many people as a public execution of the whole modernist promise. But did it really die? I mean, yeah, the grand utopian social projects were a spectacular failure. But the look, the aesthetic, the materials, those core ideas, they never really went away, did they? They just got absorbed into the mainstream, especially by big corporations and commercial developers. And that's why, today, its legacy is so fiercely debated. On one side, you have critics who point to the disastrous results, the sterile, soulless cityscapes, the failed urban renewal projects that were built on what they see as totally arbitrary ideas. But on the other side, you have supporters who see the enduring ideal. They see it as a humanistic, optimistic challenge to build a better world, to design something that truly belongs to our present moment. So, what's the final verdict here? Was modern architecture this noble blueprint for utopia that still has something to teach us today? Or was it a beautiful but ultimately arrogant and failed experiment? That's the big question. Its complicated, fascinating story leaves us to wrestle with.